Hello. Here we are. Chapter 22 of the Curatage Ghost. Emily was quizzing Sir Max on being a ghost, trying to find an angle that might help with bringing Luka back. In fact, he was not much help. He described being a ghost as like living in a damp stone where time didn't really figure and you were confined to a relatively small area. As for haunting, well, this was not a deliberate thing most of the time. Just occasionally he was aware of living people in his sphere of influence. They seemed mostly quite unaware of him. It had been only when the grandchildren had come to stay that the house had filled up with a sort of spiritual energy that had energized his own unquiet spirit. Emily wondered if he knew anything about God or angels, and disappointingly he did not. Praying to be released from this purgatory had not helped, so why was he now a solid living and breathing human being? He didn't know, but remembering the play he had just read by that modern author, said by way of a non-explanation, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Emily, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." He did remember fearing for the young boy trapped in the tunnel and finding he had some powers that he previously was unaware of, so sort of enabling him to help Luka. This was more the kind of stuff that Emily was interested in, but he did not know where those abilities came from, and now he was a person again, he didn't seem to have any special powers. Superman without the super. She pressed him to think of anything that might help, like were there sorts of channels he used to move in? Were there ghost tunnels? He thought for a while, trying to remember his long, lonely existence. The memories were fading so fast. At last he said, "Oh, these things of which you make me speak are so hard to form into words. But there are forces within and around that are strong without simple explanation. But when I was a spirit, I would not see the house as you do. The walls and layout did not match. There were places easier to be, places I felt stronger in. I suppose you could say places of power." Now that was more like it. "Where particularly, Sir Max? Come on, this might be really important. Show me where you felt strongest." She took his hand. They stopped outside the cellar door, a fabulously old door with an old carving of a bishop set in a small central recess. "It was strung here unto the roof, the old one, but down the stairs there lies the grief." He shuddered as if remembering something best not remembered. Emily turned to him and saw he was crying. "She never knew me, never loved me, but I loved her. I will love her for eternity. She was to be my wife. She would have grown to love me. I know it. She is down there, trapped forever. Her pull is strongest there. Oh, Catherine, my Kate." Well, this was progress in a backward sort of way. At least he was at last being honest, but the tunnel entrance was now closed, and anyway, the passageway had sealed itself off, so getting to that sad little cubicle would be very hard. Emily was thinking of jackhammer drills and pickaxes, but also had to admit to herself that there was no guarantee anything of the sort would help. Would help Luka in whatever predicament he was now in. Yaya and Esme had taken an altogether simple attack. They had gone to where Luka had last been seen, armed themselves with torches, etc., and were now clambering around in the rafters of the old house. There was, however, a major problem. Spiders! The old roof space was full of spiders. Yaya thought when she shone her light that she saw hundreds of tiny little eyes being reflected back on her. Esme nearly had the habdabs when she spotted a huge barn spider with a span twice as big as a hand. The girls were trying to be brave, but spiders? Thousands of them. Yaya thought she felt one drop inside her t-shirt and start crawling down her back. She started flailing around, trying to pull her shirt up, emitting muffled screams. This spooked Esme, who tripped over an old beam and fell onto the plaster in between. This was not meant for taking weight. The rule in the attic was always to walk on the beams, never ever on the plaster in between, because it won't hold your weight and you will fall through the ceiling. Which is, of course, what Esme did, with a loud, splintering crash. She was lucky. The old chaise longue on the landing broke her fall, but a lot of ceiling fell down, and she looked like a real ghost because she was covered in old horsehair plaster. Amelie and Max, who were just at the bottom of the stairs, looked up in horror when it became apparent that this apparition was only an uninjured, plastered Esme. They tried hard not to laugh, but when Yaya poked her head out of the hole in the ceiling, first Esme, then Amelie, then Yaya, and finally Sir Max, all started laughing. Grandma Judy ran out from her art studio just above the landing to see what all the fuss was about. Everyone froze in anticipation. She looked horrified. And so Esme was at least in one piece, unlike her ceiling, and so everyone shaking silently with withheld hilarity. She tried hard to be stern, but there are times when you just have to go with the flow. Soon, she was laughing too. Grandad came grumpily out of the study, shouting about not being able to get any peace in this flipping house, and what was all the ruddy commotion about, when he too took in this pantomime-like scenario. He shook his head and stared at Esme, who was standing up on the chaise longue looking like a character from Scooby-Doo. Yaya crying with laughter, with only her head showing, and Judy with her hands on her hips, giggling. Honestly, you're all as daft as brushes and not half as useful. And soon, he couldn't stop laughing either. At least, it took all their minds off, however briefly, out of the fate of young Luka, whose fate at that moment was hanging in the balance. End of chapter 22 of the Curatage Ghost. Hey ho!